Imagine for a second, just picture this. You are the CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
Oh, I'm with you.
Right. So you're sitting in your giant boardroom, looking over the quarterly balance sheet, and your chief financial officer walks in.
CFO.
Exactly. And the CFO looks at your debt profile and says, great news. We have two major liabilities on the books.
Just two. That'd be nice.
Right. But listen to what they are. The CFO says, we have a massive corporate bond costing us 22% in interest, and we have a tiny, insignificant vendor invoice costing us 4%. So I decided to take all our surplus cash and pay off the tiny 4% invoice first.
Oh, wow.
Because, well, it just felt really good to get it off the desk. We really needed a quick win.
You would have security escort that CFO out of the building before they even finished the sentence.
Exactly.
It's absolute corporate malpractice. You'd be fired by the board by the end of the day.
And yet, when we transition from that corporate boardroom to, your own kitchen table, that exact same logic is pushed on you every single day.
Yeah, it really is.
Paying off the small things for an emotional boost while the high-interest debt actively burns your house down, that is heralded as the absolute gold standard of retail personal finance.
It's wild. It genuinely forces a double take when you reframe it like that.
It does,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, you suddenly see the cognitive dissonance between how the wealthy are taught to manage capital and how the middle class is instructed to manage debt.
Which is exactly why we are jumping straight into the deep end today. We are doing a massive deep dive to dissect a radical reimagining of household debt elimination.
We have some incredibly dense material to get through.
We really do. We have a stack of this algorithmic research in front of us, specifically focusing on two core texts. There's the Strategic Velocity Avalanche framework and the Strategic Velocity Avalanche, mathematical debt liquidation.
Heavy titles.
Very heavy. But rather than just summarizing these papers like a textbook, we are going to use them to stage a high-level intellectual clash of financial methodologies.
Because the entire premise of these texts is that everything you, the average consumer, have been taught about debt payoff is not just slightly inefficient.
Right.
It is mathematically detrimental. The architects of this framework argue that retail advice fundamentally cripples your ability to build wealth.
So let me just lay my cards on the table right out of the gate here, because we are approaching this from entirely different camps today.
We definitely are.
I am stepping into this as the defender of the mainstream. I fundamentally believe that personal finance is, about 80% behavior and 20% head knowledge.
It's a classic behavioral stance.
Exactly. I stand by traditional retail advice like the famous debt snowball because human beings are not spreadsheets.
Right.
But you don't feel like you're winning, you quit. I really believe that. You need emotional momentum to stick to a multi-year debt payoff journey.
And I will gladly take the other side of this. I am advocating for the Strategic Velocity Avalanche, or the SVA.
A cold, hard mat.
Exactly. The stance of the SVA architect is that the household balance sheet must be viewed strictly as a corporate enterprise. Emotion has absolutely no place in the math of capital optimization.
No place at all.
None. From this perspective, the retail advice you're defending is really nothing more than a mathematical penalty.
Oh, penalty.
Yeah, a penalty disguised as a psychological pacifier. And it plays directly into the hands of institutional banks.
So our goal for you, the listener, is to cut through the noise of both these philosophies today. We want to figure out which methodology actually helps you achieve what the texts call real net worth velocity.
Which is the ultimate prize here.
Right. Because it isn't just about being debt-free, is it?
No, it's about setting up a system so ruthlessly efficient that you can potentially retire by 55.
Which sounds like a dream to most people, retiring at 55.
It does. But to even begin discussing early retirement, we have to audit the environment you are currently operating in.
Okay, set the stage for us.
Well, the SVA framework argues that mainstream personal finance suffers from a fundamental vulnerability. It treats household debt as a psychological hurdle rather than a mathematical enterprise.
Which, again, is my camp's entire foundational premise. Debt is stressful, so you treat the stress, you treat the behavior.
But the retail banking institutions are fully aware of that behavioral vulnerability.
Oh.
And honestly, they weaponize it.
Weaponize it how?
They do not sell money. That's the biggest misconception.
What do they sell then?
They sell the illusion of affordability. The products are meticulously engineered to extract the maximum compounding interest over the maximum possible time horizon.
All while making you feel like you are entirely in control.
Exactly. The sources spend a significant amount of ink on this illusion of affordability, particularly diving into what they call the amortization illusion.
Okay, let's unpack that, because anyone listening to this deep dive knows that banks front-load interest on things like a 30-year mortgage.
Right, it's common knowledge.
We all know the first few years of payments are mostly interest. But the framework takes this beyond just a basic definition, right? It looks at the underlying logarithmic math.
Yeah, it looks at how that decay actually traps your capital. It focuses on the velocity of the extraction.
Walk us through an example.
So when you sign for a 30-year mortgage at, let's say, 7%, the bank presents you with a fixed monthly payment. Let's call it $2,000 a month.
A nice round number.
Right. And the consumer views that $2,000 as a stable baseline. It's predictable, it fits the monthly budget spreadsheet, and it provides psychological safety.
And predictability is exactly why people opt for fixed-rate mortgages. You know exactly what your housing cost is going to be a decade from now. It lets you sleep at night.
But the SVA points out the structural trap hidden inside that predictability. In the early years of that amortization schedule, the curve is incredibly steep.
It's brutal.
It really is. The vast majority of that $2,000 is intercepted by the bank's compounding engine. The principal, the actual liability you owe, remains virtually untouched.
You're just paying for the privilege of holding the debt.
Precisely. But the illusion is that the consumer feels highly productive because they are making consistent, on-time payments. They feel responsible.
Okay, I have to push back here.
Go for it.
Yes, the math of a front-loaded amortization curve is mathematically brutal. I concede that. But you are ignoring human nature.
How so?
Consistent, stable payments are exactly what consumers need to survive the friction of modern life. Paying a fixed amount every month builds the habit of discipline.
Discipline.
Yes, it's like going to the gym. If you don't build the routine of showing up and lifting the weights, you'll never get fit. If a mortgage payment fluctuated wildly every month based on a purely mathematical principal reduction algorithm, the consumer would get overwhelmed.
They'd panic.
They would default on the loan and lose the house entirely.
See, the SVA text addresses that exact behavioral defense.
And what does it say?
It argues that your feeling of productivity is actually the core feature of the bank's extraction model.
Wait, my feeling of productivity is a feature.
Yes. Your discipline is simply the mechanism that ensures their compounding engine remains fully operational. They want you to feel comfortable on the treadmill as long as the treadmill powers their grid.
Oh, wow.
The bank is perfectly happy for you to feel like a disciplined, responsible adult while they extract tens of thousands of dollars in profit before you even begin to build equity.
So the stability is essentially a sedative.
It is a sedative. It keeps you compliant while the extraction occurs. And, this gets even more insidious when you examine how institutions handle consumer distress.
You mean when people can't make the payments?
Right, or what the banks frame as promotions.
Yeah.
The texts dive really heavily into capitalization and deferred interest.
Okay, yeah. You are talking about the 0% promotional periods on retail credit cards.
Or moments of macroeconomic stress where lenders offer forbearance.
A temporary pause on your mandatory payments?
Exactly. Think about the mechanics of those offers. Consumers look at a 12-month forbearance as a psychological lifeline. They think they have a year to breathe and get their feet back under them.
It feels like the bank is doing them a favor.
But they completely miss the hidden compounding acceleration occurring in the background. The fine print usually dictates deferred interest.
Which means what exactly for the listener who hasn't read the fine print?
It means if you miss the promotional payoff deadline by a single day, just one day, 12 months of retroactive interest at 29% is instantaneously applied to the balance.
Just boom, added to the bill.
Instantly. And then there's interest capitalization, which the sources highlight as a primary wealth destroyer.
Walk us through the specific mechanism of capitalization, because I think this is where the math quietly guts the consumer without them even noticing.
Yeah. Interest capitalization occurs when the paused interest, the interest you were allowed to skip during your forbearance break,
Yeah.
it's permanently grafted onto the principal balance of your liability.
Okay, give us a visual.
Let's visualize a $50,000 student loan. During a period of hardship forbearance, let's say the loan accrues $3,000 in interest.
So you owe $50,000 plus the $3,000 in interest.
Right. But at the end of the forbearance, you don't just owe $50,000 plus a separate bill for $3,000. The bank capitalizes it.
Meaning they combine them.
Yes. Your new foundational loan balance is $53,000.
Meaning the bank is now actively charging you interest on the interest they allowed you to skip.
Exactly. You are now paying a yield on a phantom balance that provided you zero actual capital.
That's incredibly predatory.
But the consumer treats the forbearance as a behavioral victory. They think, hey, I survived a tough year.
Meanwhile, the math.
Mathematically, the institution just widened the base of the compounding engine. The SVA framework uses this to prove that seeking psychological comfort in personal finance is the primary vector institutions use to trap you in perpetual debt cycles.
Okay, I see the trap. The math of front-loaded amortization and hidden capitalization is undeniably rigged against the borrower. I give you that.
It's mathematically proven.
But I will maintain my stance. Because the trap preys on our psychological behavior, I still believe the escape route must also be a behavioral strategy.
You're doubling down on the behavior.
I have to. If human beings are prone to emotional mistakes, they require emotional victories to reverse course and sustain a multi-year recovery effort.
And this brings us directly to the absolute core of our debate today.
Yes, it does. The clash between the debt snowball and the strategic velocity avalanche.
Let's get into it.
I am officially planting my flag in defense of the behavioral debt snowball fallacy, which is how your sources rather dismissively label it.
They do call it a fallacy, yes.
But this is the method championed by nearly every mainstream retail financial advisor. And the execution is incredibly straightforward for the average person.
Too straightforward, the SVA would argue.
Well, you list all your debts, from the smallest balance to the largest balance. You completely ignore the interest rates. You are blind to them. You pay the minimums on everything to keep the accounts current. And you weaponize every single spare dollar of surplus capital against the smallest balance first.
And the framework categorizes that approach as mathematically absurd.
But it is practically brilliant in the real world.
Cool.
Here is the mechanism of why it actually works. You secure immediate, undeniable, quick wins.
Quick wins.
Yes. If you have a cluster of debts and you knock out the smallest one in just 6 weeks, you trigger a massive dopamine response in your brain. You feel victorious.
A dopamine hit.
You have physically eradicated a stressor from your mental bandwidth. That emotional momentum is the combustible fuel that keeps a tired, overworked consumer going for the next 3 years to tackle the massive, terrifying debts at the bottom of the list.
Okay, but the SVA framework rejects the necessity of that dopamine response entirely.
It just ignores human emotion.
Completely. In its place, it introduces Directive 1, the mathematical avalanche, or what the architects term spread decapitation.
Spread decapitation. I mean, it sounds like we are executing a hostile takeover of a rival corporation.
That verbiage is highly intentional because you are supposed to treat your household balance sheet with the ruthless efficiency of a corporate raider.
Okay, Gordon Gekko.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The core directive here is that logic must dictate the sequence of capital deployment, never emotion. Surplus capital is treated as live ammunition.
Live ammunition.
It must be deployed strictly and exclusively against a liability carrying the highest interest rate or the highest spread on the balance sheet.
Ignoring the balance size entirely.
Entirely. The SVA argues that the snowball method intentionally leaves higher-yielding, actively compounding liabilities alive longer. You are literally bleeding raw capital to the bank just to purchase a temporary feeling of accomplishment.
All right, let's ground this theory in hard numbers, because the source material provides a very specific illustrative ledger scenario to highlight this exact friction.
Let's do it.
Let's walk the listener through the numbers from the text to see how the behavioral approach actually stacks up against your corporate treasury mechanics.
Okay, let's look at the theoretical ledger. Imagine a household with 3 distinct liabilities.
3 debts, got it.
You have a $30,000 auto loan sitting at 8% interest.
Okay, 30 grand at 8%.
You have a $15,000 credit card at a punishing 22% interest.
Ouch. 15 grand at 22?
And finally, a $5,000 personal loan at 10% interest.
Okay, let me execute the snowball protocol here.
Show me the mainstream approach.
Under the mainstream behavioral method, I look at that exact ledger. I completely ignore the catastrophic 22% interest rate on the credit card.
Which is painful just to hear.
And I attack the $5,000 personal loan first.
Even though it's only 10%.
Why? Because it is the smallest nominal balance. I can wipe that $5,000 off the board in maybe 4 or 5 months of aggressive payments. When I do that, that account is officially closed. I get a physical letter in the mail saying paid in full. The psychological momentum is immense. I feel like an absolute winner.
And while you are celebrating that letter, let's look at the mathematical reality of what your dopamine hit just cost you.
Lay it on me.
While you are hyper-focused on eliminating a $5,000 balance compounding at a relatively mild 10%, you deliberately allowed a $15,000 balance to compound actively at a predatory 22%.
It's higher interest, sure, but the behavioral argument is that I'll roll the payment from the small loan into the big loan eventually. I'll get to it with more momentum.
Eventually, the texts run the actual projections on that, eventually.
And what do they find?
Over a standard 36 to 48-month liquidation runway, prioritizing the snowball sequence over mathematical spread decapitation will cost the household thousands and frequently tens of thousands of dollars in raw, unrecoverable interest penalties.
Tens of thousands.
Yes, the framework is blunt. You are voluntarily paying tens of thousands of dollars for a localized dopamine hit.
Oof. Framing it as purchasing a feeling for 10 grand is a very tough pill to swallow.
It is designed to be uncomfortable, which is why the SVA introduces a concept it calls the Kahneman rule.
The Kahneman rule,
Oh.
like Daniel Kahneman, the behavioral economist.
Exactly. This rule is mandatory reading for anyone serious about optimizing their net worth. It is a mental model designed to neutralize the institutional biases you've been fed.
What does the rule actually state?
I'm quoting directly from the framework here. Paying down a 22% credit card is mathematically identical to buying a risk-free asset yielding 22%. Why would you ignore that opportunity to pay off a 4% student loan just because the balance is smaller?
Mathematically identical to buying a risk-free asset yielding 22%. That is a fascinating mental pivot.
It changes everything, doesn't it?
It flips debt payoff from a defensive chore into an offensive investment strategy.
Think about the implications of that rule. If your brokerage firm called you this afternoon and said, hey, we have access to a guaranteed risk-free, tax-free municipal bond that yields an annualized return of 22%, what would you say?
I would think it was an illegal Ponzi scheme.
Right.
I would assume someone was going to jail. You can't get guaranteed 22% returns.
Because a guaranteed 22% return does not exist in standard capital markets.
Yeah.
Yet you already have that exact financial instrument sitting on your kitchen counter.
The credit card statement.
It is your credit card statement. Every single dollar of principal you eliminate on that card is a guaranteed 22% return on your capital.
Because you are permanently preventing that specific interest from compounding against your future net worth.
Exactly. The Kahneman rule strips away the emotion and exposes the raw mechanics. Ignoring the 22% card to pay off a 10% personal loan isn't just slightly inefficient. It is active financial self-sabotage.
Wow. Okay, I concede the point.
The math usually wins.
The math is irrefutable here. The Kahneman rule completely dismantles the logic of the snowball in a vacuum. But, and this is a massive system-breaking, but I have a colossal red flag here regarding risk.
Okay, let's hear the red flag.
If a listener takes this corporate treasury advice and they throw every single spare dollar of surplus capital blindly at a massive 22% credit card just to satisfy the algorithm of spread decapitation, they are introducing catastrophic systemic risk into their household.
Walk me through the failure point as you see it. Where is the risk?
It's the reality of a volatile life. If you drain your checking account down to zero every 2 weeks to execute this hyper-aggressive spread decapitation, you leave yourself structurally illiquid.
You have no cash buffer.
Zero cash buffer. What happens when the transmission in your commuter car suddenly explodes? What happens if you are a freelancer and a client delays a $5,000 invoice for 60 days?
You have zero liquid cash.
Exactly. You sent it all to the credit card company to optimize your interest spread. So what do? You end up having to put the transmission repair right back onto that 22% credit card.
And you're right back where you started.
Worse, because the psychological defeat of sliding backward after sacrificing so much liquid cash will absolutely break a person's resolve. They will abandon the system entirely.
This is where the debate gets incredibly layered. Because the texts throw a massive curveball right here.
A curveball?
The architect behind the SVA framework completely, 100% agrees with your assessment of the risk.
Wait, really? The mathematically ruthless algorithm agrees with the behavioral advocate?
Emphatically. The framework explicitly states that the standard textbook avalanche method, the basic concept you find on financial blogs that just says, throw all your money at the highest interest rate, is fundamentally flawed for the exact liquidity reason you just outlined.
Because basic avalanche ignores the risk of ruin.
The framework labels the standard avalanche approach as blind deployment. It incentivizes you to zero out your operating accounts to fight the debt, leaving you naked against macroeconomic shocks.
So how does the SVA fix that?
The Strategic Velocity Avalanche diverges sharply from the standard model here. It introduces a structural defense mechanism called asset liability insulation.
Asset liability insulation. I am extremely skeptical of how you can aggressively decapitate high-interest debt without simultaneously draining your liquidity. How does the mechanism actually function?
It functions through Directive 2, the bankruptcy threshold, which is also referred to as liquidity gating.
Liquidity gating. Okay.
The foundational rule is absolute. A practitioner must never recommend or execute capital deployments that risk freezing the primary W-2 liquidity engine.
Meaning your ability to earn a living.
Yes. Protecting your baseline operational capacity is the highest priority.
Okay, let's pressure test this. How does the liquidity gate handle the variable income scenario I mentioned earlier? If my income fluctuates, how do I know what is safe to deploy and what needs to be hoarded?
The SVA implements a strict just-in-time, or JIT, cash flow gate. Think of it as a series of sequential dams on a river.
Sequential dams. I like the visual.
Your incoming revenue does not automatically flood down into the debt elimination grid. Instead, all income passes into an insulated primary billing node first.
So we are talking about a completely isolated checking account that exists solely to process survival expenses.
Precisely. And within this isolated node, you calculate a hard-coded monthly operational bill floor.
What goes into that floor?
This is not a rough estimate. It is the exact audited amount of capital required to survive a 30-day cycle. Housing, baseline caloric intake, essential utilities, transportation to your revenue source, and the minimum payments on all existing liabilities.
Survival mode.
Pure survival. Your surplus capital is completely frozen behind the dam until that specific monthly operational bill floor is 100% satisfied.
But going back to the freelancer example, what if my income this month is $3,000 lower than average?
For highly volatile revenue models, the SVA simply extends the JIT gate horizon.
How far?
Instead of gating 1 month of the operational bill floor, the algorithm requires gating 45 or 60 days of the floor before any capital is classified as weaponized surplus.
Ah, I see.
The rule remains the same. Capital is only released into the active Avalanche engine. It is only allowed to strike the 22% credit card after the operational defensive perimeter is fully funded.
So the framework is deliberately building a concrete wall between the wealth-building offensive matrix and the daily operational reality of keeping the lights on.
It permanently insulates the primary income engine. If the transmission blows up, you aren't forced into bankruptcy.
And you aren't forced to swipe the high-interest card again.
Exactly, because your operational floor, which includes a capitalized buffer for structural maintenance, was secured before you ever executed a debt strike. No strategic acceleration is ever permitted to compromise your immediate intraday operational liquidity.
I will say, that significantly alters my view of the math-first approach.
It's not just blind math, it's structural math.
My primary objection to the standard Avalanche was that it assumed a frictionless universe where cars don't break and roofs don't leak. But by installing a just-in-time cash flow gate, the SVA is actually mimicking real corporate treasury management.
Precisely.
A functional corporation does not drain its primary operating account to zero just to pay down a bond early. It ensures payroll and vendor invoices are fully funded first.
The liquidity gate is what separates mathematical theory from survivable real-world execution. It prevents systemic risk while maintaining the highest possible velocity on surplus capital.
All right, you've satisfied my concerns about a listener going bankrupt while following the math.
Good to hear.
Now let's push the system further. Because we have been discussing relatively clean two-dimensional scenarios, a credit card versus a personal loan.
The easy stuff.
Right. But an actual household balance sheet is rarely that neat. How does the SVA algorithm handle highly complex, nuanced debt ecosystems? Because the structural reality of a 30-year mortgage is vastly different from a federally subsidized student loan.
This is the juncture where the SVA graduates from being a simple spreadsheet priority list into advanced algorithmic warfare.
Algorithmic warfare.
The fundamental difference is that standard methods treat your capital as a static score, while the SVA treats your capital as live inventory.
Let's expand on live inventory. What does that actually mean practically? How does this system anticipate future cash flow?
The best way to understand it is by contrasting the models. The standard Avalanche method looks at your debt ledger today, right now. It is a static, rigid list.
You just follow the list from top to bottom.
You start at the top, you pay it down, and you don't adjust until the account is closed. But the SVA utilizes something called dynamic cascade modeling.
If I am trying to visualize dynamic cascade modeling, I'm picturing the staging sequence of a multi-stage rocket. Is that the right mental model?
That is an incredibly accurate metaphor. The SVA continuously simulates look-ahead cash flow horizons, typically in rolling 90-day windows.
So it's looking 3 months into the future.
Always. It does not merely look at the static balance you owe today. It maps out the immediate life cycle and trajectory of every single liability node in the system.
Walk me through a concrete timeline using the rocket metaphor. Let's say I'm aggressively paying down a cluster of debts.
Okay, let's say your primary target right now is an auto loan. Based on the velocity of your weekly surplus capital strikes, the SVA algorithm looks ahead and calculates that in exactly 75 days, the auto loan will hit a zero balance.
The first stage of the rocket burns through its fuel and detaches.
Exactly. Now, the standard retail method says, great job, you paid off the car. When that happens in a few months, sit down and figure out what to do with the extra money in your budget.
Which leaves room for human error. You might just spend that money.
Right. The SVA entirely removes human latency from the equation. It pre-programs the system to harvest the exact moment that liquidation event occurs.
Instantaneous harvesting.
It knows that the microsecond the auto loan hits zero, a fixed minimum monthly overhead requirement is instantly eliminated. The system instantly reroutes that newly freed capital into the active fuel lines of the weekly debt strikes against the next highest yielding target.
So it isn't waiting for the end of the month for me to manually review my budget and decide to increase my credit card payment. It is a continuous, pre-calculated cascade.
Continuous.
The second the car loan drops off, the monthly cash flow that was going to the car automatically merges with the surplus capital attacking the credit card.
It merges instantaneously. And because this is mapped out in rolling look-ahead horizons, it generates exponential principal destruction.
Exponential.
You are systematically rolling over dead minimum payments into the primary offensive engine. The framework's internal data shows that this specific automated cascade mechanic compresses the total runway to absolute debt freedom from a timeline of decades down to a matter of years.
I love the mechanics of the cascade. But let me throw a highly specific, very tricky scenario at the algorithm. Something a lot of listeners with diverse portfolios probably face.
Throw it at me. Let's see how it holds up.
What happens when the algorithm encounters a mathematical tie? Let's say a listener has 2 distinct debts with the exact same nominal interest rate. Let's use a 4% student loan and a 4% fixed-rate mortgage.
Okay, 2 4s.
If the algorithm is only programmed to decapitate the highest number, how does it choose between 2 4s?
A standard avalanche algorithm encounters a fatal error there. It treats them as identical liabilities because the nominal integers match. It essentially tells you to flip a coin.
Right.
But the SVA introduces a diagnostic layer called structural interest auditing.
Structural interest auditing. We are definitely leaving retail advice behind now.
The SVA does not blindly trust the nominal rate. It analyzes the underlying legal and financial architecture of the debt instrument. It utilizes a process called interest typology dissection.
Dissect the typology for me. What are we actually looking for under the hood of a 4% loan?
The system categorizes liabilities by their mathematical behavior over time. Specifically, it hunts for the difference between compounding interest, which aggressively and exponentially decays your net worth, and simple non-capitalizing interest, which acts as a flat, predictable drag on capital.
So applying that to our tiebreaker, the 4% student loan versus the 4% mortgage.
A federally backed student loan is frequently structured as simple interest. Furthermore, it possesses protective regulatory guardrails.
Guardrails like what?
For example, there are specific legal statutes barring the capitalization of interest during certain types of administrative forbearance.
Meaning, if you are forced to pause payments on the student loan, the interest accrues, but it doesn't compound into the principal. It just sits in a separate bucket.
Correct. The architecture of the loan prevents exponential runaway. The mortgage, however, is a relentless compounding engine.
It's constantly capitalizing.
The SVA algorithm recognizes that a simple interest structure is a mathematically weaker, less volatile opponent than a compound interest structure.
Even if the rates are identical.
Therefore, even though the nominal rates are identical at 4%, the SVA dynamically downranks the non-compounding student loan. It breaks the nominal parity.
The system decides the mortgage is the greater systemic threat. So it keeps the simple interest student loan on the lowest possible standard minimum payments and channels all weaponized surplus capital to maximize principal compression on the compounding asset.
Exactly. You are always attacking the node that possesses the mechanical capability to inflict the most exponential damage to your future net worth.
I am genuinely marveling at the corporate level precision here, but putting my behavioral advocate hat back on for a second,
I knew that hat was coming back.
I have to ask the practical question. How does a normal human being actually maintain this operating system without entirely losing their mind?
It's a valid question.
This framework demands absolute, unrelenting rigor. We are talking about mapping out 90-day cash flow horizons, isolating capital behind just-in-time gates, and dissecting the legal architecture of loan typologies.
The architects of the SVA do not shy away from the fact that this requires immense rigor. This brings us to the third and final guiding principle of the framework. Directive 3. 1C is 1C, which translates to 1 cent is 1 cent.
1 cent is 1 cent.
This is the doctrine of absolute capital optimization. You're required to track and account for every single penny in the ecosystem.
Because, as the source text warns, and I think I'm quoting here, capital that sits unallocated is active inventory experiencing inflationary decay.
Exactly. If you have $500 sitting in a checking account that is not allocated to the operational floor and is not deployed against a liability, you are suffering a double loss.
It's a double loss.
Macroeconomic inflation is silently eating the purchasing power of that cash, while simultaneously your highest interest debt is compounding against you. Idle capital is bleeding net worth.
What are the actual daily execution details required to prevent that decay? How far into the weeds does a practitioner really have to go?
The text outlines a highly structured, almost sterile data environment. Liability accounts must be aggressively scrubbed of historical clutter the precise moment they read zero. But it goes deeper. The practitioner is required to calculate and eliminate trailing interest drift.
Trailing interest drift. Let me guess. That is the phenomenon where you log into your portal, pay off a $5,000 balance, celebrate, and then log in 3 days later only to find a new balance of $2.14 because the interest accrues daily.
The framework categorizes those as legacy dust balances.
Legacy dust balances, they're so annoying.
They are. And because most consumer debt accrues based on an average daily balance formula, there is a delay between your payment clearing and the interest halting. The SVA requires you to systematically hunt down and expunge those dust balances.
Hunt them down how?
You must manually calculate the daily per diem interest rate, overpay the final strike by that exact margin, and verify the zero state to keep the data environment completely sterilized.
Okay, I have to interject with the reality of the human element again. A normal listener has a life.
Sure.
They have a demanding W-2 job, they have children, they have a spouse who might not want to run a corporate treasury, and they have general exhaustion.
It is a lot of friction.
Calculating the per diem interest drift on a legacy dust balance requires logging into clunky banking interfaces, waiting on hold with customer service, and dealing with immense friction. How does a person filter out the daily chaos to stay on this incredibly rigorous path without burning out in month 2?
The architects of the SCA fully anticipated the cognitive load this system places on the user. They understood that operational fatigue is the primary failure point.
So they built a solution for the fatigue.
To counteract this, they built a massive cognitive operating system known as the 3 operational modes. This isn't just about math. It is a mental framework designed to ruthlessly eliminate distraction and prevent burnout.
Let's expand heavily on these 3 modes, because if a listener is going to attempt this, they need the survival guide. What is the first operational mode?
The first mode is filter, or type 1 processing. This mode is entirely designed to reduce ambient noise and decision fatigue.
How does it work?
For every vague financial request, impulse, or optimization idea that pops into your week, you apply Pareto logic, the 80-20 rule. The objective is to identify the vital few actions that actually move the needle on net worth velocity and ruthlessly ignore the rest.
Give me a real-world scenario of the filter mode in action. What is considered noise versus a vital action?
Let's say you spend 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon visiting 4 different grocery stores to aggressively clip coupons and chase sales, ultimately saving $12 on your weekly grocery bill.
A lot of people do that.
Under the SVA framework, that is classified as operational noise. The energy expenditure does not justify the capital return.
Right.
Conversely, spending 20 minutes on a Tuesday morning to log into your portal and execute a precision spread decapitation strike that permanently prevents $2,000 of future compounding interest, That is a vital action.
The ROI on the time is massive.
Exactly. The filter mode forces you to stop wasting cognitive bandwidth on pennies when you are bleeding thousands in interest.
It prioritizes the highest yield behavior. I like that. What is the second operational mode?
The second mode is lens, or type 2 processing. This mode is dedicated to second-order thinking.
Second-order thinking.
This is the defense mechanism against impulse and emotional drift. When a user, or perhaps a spouse who isn't fully integrated into the SVA mindset, proposes a deviation from the plan, like a sudden purchase or a vacation, you do not argue about the purchase itself.
What do you do instead?
You apply the lens and ask one specific mandatory question. And then what happens in 90 days?
And then what happens in 90 days? That is a brilliant psychological interrupter. It forces the brain out of the emotional craving of the present moment.
It forces the user to manually calculate the cascade effect of their decision. If I bypass the just-in-time date to buy this upgraded car today, what happens to my operational floor in 90 days? What happens to the projected liquidation date of the 22% credit card?
It instantly illuminates the long-term structural consequences of a short-term emotional urge. If I buy the car, I delay the credit card payoff by 6 months, which means the car actually costs me the sticker price plus an additional $3,000 in credit card interest penalties.
The lens makes the hidden cost visible.
It does. And the third mode?
The final mode is guard, or type 3 processing. This is the continuous auditing mechanism. You must audit every single financial task or obligation against your primary weekly goal.
How does guard differ from filter?
Filter is about identifying high-yield actions.
Yeah.
Guard is about defending your time against false emergencies.
False emergencies.
If a task is demanding your immediate attention, if society or a retailer is telling you a sale is urgent, but that task is not mathematically important to the velocity of your debt liquidation, you strictly flag it as a distraction. You lock it out of your schedule and you discard it.
So this entire framework is far more than just a spreadsheet algorithm prioritizing interest rates. It is an end-to-end cognitive operating system.
It has to be comprehensive. Because the transition the SVA demands is profound. You are systematically stepping out of the role of a passive, vulnerable consumer and assuming the mantle of a ruthless corporate treasurer managing your own life.
Let's zoom all the way out and look at the ultimate destination of deploying this corporate treasury framework inside a household. What is the true end game if a listener actually commits to this level of rigor and pulls it off?
The source texts synthesize the long-term systemic benefits beautifully. By swimming against the current of retail financial advice and embracing mathematical optimization, the practitioner achieves 3 massive, life-altering advantages.
The first advantage being the core concept we introduced at the very beginning, real net worth velocity.
Right, and we can finally define what that means mathematically. Every single dollar of interest that you save through precision spread decapitation, every dollar you permanently deny the banking institution is a dollar added directly, dollar for dollar, to your household net worth.
Wow.
And the profound beauty of that captured capital is that it is entirely untaxed and uninflated.
Unpack that untaxed aspect, because I think people really miss how powerful a saved dollar really is compared to an earned dollar.
A penny saved by preventing a 22% interest charge is worth significantly more to your net worth than a penny earned by working overtime at a W-2 job.
Why is that?
When you earn $1 at your job, the government takes 20 to 30% in income taxes before you even see it. But when you deploy surplus capital to avoid an interest charge, you do not pay income tax on the wealth you retained.
It's invisible wealth.
It is the most efficient form of wealth generation available to the middle class.
That is a staggering way to frame debt payoff. The interest saved is literally a tax-free guaranteed yield. What is the second systemic advantage?
The second advantage is time sovereignty.
Time sovereignty. This connects directly to the provocative goal of retiring by 55, doesn't it?
They are inextricably linked. When you escape the amortization trap, when you are no longer forced to generate $2,000 a month just to service a bank's compounding profit margin, you drastically, permanently lower your household's required baseline operational floor.
Because your fixed costs are essentially zero?
If your balance sheet is cleared of massive compounding liabilities, you no longer require a massive high-stress salary just to survive the month.
You completely decouple your survival from your W-2 income.
That decoupling creates time sovereignty. You buy back your future time. It accelerates the mathematical viability of early retirement, transforming the idea of stepping away at 55 from a pipe dream into a highly predictable, mathematically inevitable outcome.
And the third benefit, which I think after this entire debate is probably the most profound transformation a listener will undergo, is what the framework refers to as cognitive independence.
Yes, the practitioner ceases to be a viable target for retail banking products. You view the entire financial matrix with absolute, sterile clarity. You operate as an analytical corporate entity rather than an emotionally vulnerable consumer.
You see the matrix for what it really is. You see the 0% interest promotion not as a generous gift from a retailer, but as a deliberate FAP designed to capitalize deferred interest. You see the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage not as an achievement of affordability, but as a meticulously designed compounding extraction engine.
You achieve complete immunity to the marketing.
I have to say, as the host who walked into this deep dive ready to vehemently defend the emotional, behavioral, dopamine-driven debt snowball, this framework has systematically dismantled my position.
That is the raw, undeniable power of exposing the math.
I will still maintain the reality of human behavior, though. I still believe that people deeply struggle with discipline and that the emotional fatigue of paying off debt is a massive hurdle.
It is a hurdle.
But the brilliance of the SVA framework is that it actually accounts for those human flaws mechanically. The just-in-time liquidity gate prevents the catastrophic risk of ruin. The three operational modes, filter, lens, and guard, systematically prevent distraction and cognitive burnout. It really is a complete closed-loop system.
It's built for survival.
I think we have to conclude this debate by acknowledging that there is a very clear divide in who these respective methods are built for.
How do you define that divide based on the texts?
I will concede this point to the framework. The traditional debt snowball is for consumers who still require training wheels.
Grading wheels.
Yes. It is a valid starting point for people who are so overwhelmed by the behavioral stress of their finances that they desperately need an emotional dopamine hit just to stay in the game and build basic habits.
I agree with that.
But the Strategic Velocity Avalanche is for executives. It is for listeners who are ready to strip the emotion entirely out of the equation, ruthlessly optimize their capital inventory, and actually construct a viable path to early retirement.
I think that is the most accurate synthesis of the debate. The SVA is simply corporate treasury mechanics applied to your kitchen table.
So we will leave you, the listener, with a final lingering question to mull over as you sit down and look at your own household balance sheet today. Think back to that Fortune 500 CEO firing their CFO for prioritizing a temporary emotional feeling over the brutal reality of compound math. If you started treating your household like a ruthless corporate treasury today, auditing every dollar against the Kahneman rule, what training wheels in your current financial life would you have to admit you're still relying on?